There are only 8 days until FNCS returns. Some teams are hitting insane form right now, others not so much. We had the first Divisional Cup of the season yesterday. It was a tournament with the craziest zones. We had the winners manage 3 victory royales. I'll break down all the teams that did well, all the teams that struggled in this video. Let's get straight into it. So of all 50 teams that qualified, it was the Polish duo of Darm and Demus that were able to win the tournament. And listen, we have to mention it, they did get lucky with the zones. We had 5 out of the 6 zones in this tournament pull up to the northwest of the map. Of course, Darm and Demus were landing at Tip Top Terrace, so that suited them very well. But listen, I don't want the narrative to be that Darm and Demus were carried by zones, because they played this tournament exceptionally. I mean, they finished 162 points clear of second. That's just insane. I mean, they were literally first throughout the whole tournament. They didn't drop out of it once. We had Demus finish with 30 eliminations, which was more than double the player in second, who was his own teammate Darm with 16. Demus also had the most damage too, just a brilliant individual performance from him. But what is so impressive about this team is their synergy. They really do fight well as a unit. We saw that in the off spawns. They beat Twek and Mydro over at Tip Top Terrace 4 times. They did run in one of the games, and in another one, Twek and Mydro didn't get in. But this is something that we've seen before. Back in Chapter 6, when it was Pix, Darm and Demus, we saw them 4-0 Thomas HD, Sky and Scroll in the spawn fight, so we know that they have what it takes. And listen, the dynamic in this duo is very interesting. I think a lot of people may have expected Darm and Demus to not quite hit the heights that they managed in 2025. Of course, they went into that year as a complete outside team, having never made an FNCS Grand Finals, and they managed the 3rd, they managed the 5th, they managed the 6th at Globals, and that was all with Pix, who was of course their IGL. Now, they don't have Pix anymore, it's just the 2 of them. They are 2 fraggers, but listen, you wouldn't even know it. They are playing excellently, their game plans are great, and yeah, that's really something that's impressed me. I did wonder if perhaps they'd struggle without the leadership of Pix, but no such issues for them. It definitely feels like something has clicked for this team in the past few weeks. Previously, they weren't playing badly by any means, they were making finals, but they weren't getting those high finishes. They weren't hitting the heights that perhaps we thought they could. Now, in week 5 of the Divisional Cup last season, they did manage a 2nd place, and that's when I felt like something switched. I felt like we finally saw the full potential of this duo, and well, yesterday's performance was just exceptional. Yes, I know they got lots of zones. I mean, you're going to hear so many people talking about that, but don't forget that they weren't the only team that pulled these zones. You had teams like Chap and Flixie up there that were getting very favourable pulls, and they couldn't quite capitalise with it. Darm and Demus, they had the favourable situation, but they made it work for them. But the big question for this team is whether they can replicate this kind of performance in FNCS, and there's a couple of limiting factors. The first is their drop spot. Now, of course, last season they were landing over at Clawsey Lodge, and that has since been removed from the game. They were initially going to land over at Frigid Fortress, but it seems like they weren't wanting to contest Vico and Malabuka, so Tip Top Terrace is their spot. Can they get that uncon in the grand finals? That does remain to be seen. It really depends who qualifies for those finals out of the heats. We know that Syned and Giras are a team that like to land at that spot, and honestly, with their quality, you'd expect them to be making grands. So it's by no means guaranteed that Darm and Demus are going to have an uncon POI. However, we know their quality and we know their history. They're a team that did switch around a little bit during Chapter 6. They were a team that were initially landing over at Utopia City. They later switched over to the Rainbow Split because there were too many teams contesting them. So they are very adaptable. They won't get involved in spawn fights just for the sake of it. I'm sure they're going to be able to find a spot in grand finals. And listen, top 20 for the Summit Land, that is the minimum expectation for these guys. I would like to see these guys challenging for at least the top 5. Could they win FNCS? With the right drop, it's on the cards. Now in second place, we have Chino and Pablo Wingu. Honestly, they did play really well throughout the tournament. They've just been completely overshadowed by the fact that Darm and Demus had a 162 point lead, which again is just remarkable. But listen, Chino and Pablo seem to be turning a new leaf at the moment. They were actually pretty good last season. They didn't win a Divisional Cup, but they came close a couple of times. It does seem that they are now having Sandy Strip uncontested more often. They did put out a tweet at the start of the season saying that they would fight anyone that landed there with them. In past tournaments, they have been known to split the POI. It seems like those days are over. Chino and Pablo getting very aggressive. And listen, these guys were great during this cup. It has to be said that the zones didn't really favour them, but second place is still very good, and it puts them in a great spot going into FNCS next week. In third place, we had Akira and Karama, and this is a team that we know are super consistent. They've been brilliant during the off-season, they're great in the Opens formats, they're great in the Victory Cups. Perhaps the one piece of criticism that people have leveled against them is that they're not the best in set lobby finals. And well, they're proving the doubters wrong. Listen, a third place yesterday, they also managed a 7th and a 6th in the previous 2 divisional cups last season. They're proving that they can hang with Europe's best, but they deserve to be included in the conversation with these top duos. They are by far the best French duo in my opinion, the big French hope for globals. I'm sure we'll see them at the Summit LAN, and yeah, I'm just very excited about these guys. They're looking great at the moment. A double controller duo as well, something that's quite rare on EU. It's very nice to see. In fourth place, we have a team that perhaps I owe an apology to, and that is Vanya and Wox. Now, if you've been watching the content lately, you'll know that I've not been too high on these guys. It felt like, don't get me wrong, a team that consisted of 2 great individual players, but 2 players that were kind of forced to play together. They felt like they were each other's last option, and I wasn't sure the chemistry was there. I didn't feel like they had too much synergy. But listen, they've proved me wrong. A 4th place is a very good finish. They also managed to win a game and looked decent doing it. Previously, I was saying these guys should split. Honestly, I can't believe they've even lasted this long, but they obviously know something I don't. They're pro players for a reason, and they have now got the rewards of their work. And listen, this is all just in time for FNCS. It's the perfect time to peak. We'll have to see how they get on. In 5th place, we had Sky and Scroll, and this could have been a different story had their spawn situation been a little bit more favourable. They died in last place in the first game to Afexi and Della. Listen, it's tough because Battle with Boulevard is so big, it's so open. It is one of those POIs that you have to realistically expect you will be contested at. You won't be able to get it all your own way. And when Sky and Scroll do have that north side all to themselves, we know that they are contenders to win, and more often than not, they do manage that first place. Honestly, 5th, whilst they had a lot of other teams with them, it's not too bad. I just feel like this is going to be a problem that's going to go on. They are kind of limited by their spawn situation. If they have a team on them, then they're going to struggle a bit. If they don't, then they're going to do well. I do wonder if their FNCS Grands placement, should they qualify, will be very dependent on their spawn situation. Watch out for that. In 6th place, we had Skyjump and Mumsy. Now, this is a relatively new French duo, and they looked very good during this tournament. They've actually switched their drop spot up. They were landing over at the northwest of the map, so they obviously did benefit from some of the zones. But listen, they were also cleaning up the Fredoxy versus Marius fight. I'll talk about that a little bit more later in the video, but they were able to clean up some eliminations from that, get some surge. That definitely helped them out, and 6th was pretty solid. Credit to them. In 7th, we had Vico and Malabuka. Now, it's difficult to know how to perceive this result. On the one hand, 7th is solid. It's inside the top 10. They've looked good, and it's where you want to see them. On the other hand, though, they had an on-comp POI. It was Frigid Fortress. They had very favourable zone pools. I honestly would have expected a little bit more. I do feel like they should have been challenging for that top 3 at least. And with a team of their quality, the fact that they are the defending Divisional Cup champions, maybe I would have liked to have seen a little bit more. I did think they were going to be contested going into the final, so I didn't place them too high in my predictions. I had them in 8th because it looked like Power and Jax were going to land on them. That didn't even end up happening. They had all 6 games on con. Maybe the trepidation around being contested did affect them, but listen, 7th is fine. Just would have expected a little bit more. In 8th place, we had Nebs and Nathan, and this is a duo that were very much Jekyll and Hyde throughout the tournament. When they could get off spawn, they were great. They managed 2/3 and a 4th place. However, they also died off spawn in a couple of games too. So they were making their opportunities count. Unfortunately, their opportunities were few and far between. But definitely promising signs for this team. It's also nice to see a UK duo doing well in 2026. Maybe I'm a little bit biased on that one, but it is good to see. In 9th place, we had Yapko and Panzer. Now, these guys are a little bit up and down at the moment. This is a nice placement, considering the fact we have FNCS in 8 days. They want to be finishing in that top 10. They want to be in and around those top placements. It's a solid performance, but it's not the best we've seen from them. They did, of course, win the 3rd Divisional Cup last season. They also came 2nd in the latest EWC qualifier. So we know that these guys have quality. Will they be able to show it come FNCS? Finally, to round out the leaderboard, in 10th place we had Chap and Flixie, and as I mentioned earlier, these guys had very favourable zone pools. They of course land up at the North Mountain where Vico and Malabuka used to land, and with the Northwest zones that we had, I would have expected them to do a little bit better. Again, 10th isn't a bad finish, we don't need to be getting concerned about it. I just felt like with some of the luck they had throughout the tournament, perhaps they should have made a little bit more out of it. So that is the top 10 from the Divisional Cup. Those are the teams that are looking great going into next week. Now let's talk about some of the duos that did struggle a bit, the first one being Shark and Teeny. Now yesterday started out great for them. They announced their new org, they have officially signed for Aurora Gaming, congratulations to them. Unfortunately, the tournament did not go how they wanted. They were only able to play out 2 games, them being game 1 and game 5, because Shark's internet went out for 3 games and then Teeny was unable to load his game for the final one. Just very, very bad luck all round for them. Of course, we were all very excited to see the off-spawn over at Wonky Land with Shark and Teeny there, with Mongrel and Turtle there, and with Fishy X and Domla there, and we just didn't get to see that play out, which was a shame. With the absence of Shark and Teeny, Wonky Land was a lot less aggressive. We saw Fishy and Mongrel split the POI, and they both did pretty well from that. Fishy X and Domla managing in 11th place, whilst Mongrel and Turtle managed in 18th, which, considering it's their first Divisional Cup they've made of 2026, is a pretty solid placement. But look, spare a thought for Shark and Teeny, because of all the Divisional Cups they had to have internet issues in, it was the one where the zones were so favourable for them. And you have to imagine, even whilst they had 2 teams landing near them, had they been able to play out 6 games, I think they could have had a shot at winning. With those zones, with their quality, how good they are at fighting, how good they are at recovering games, I genuinely think they could have been breaking into at least the top 3. It got a bit fiery after the tournament, with Shark leaking how Turtle apparently tried to drop Mongrel 3 times. Perhaps he's trying to sow some seeds of doubt into that duo. But listen, Mongrel and Turtle looking pretty solid at the moment. I really don't see them splitting. It'll be interesting to see how they get on in FNCS. Honestly, prior to this week, I wasn't too high on this team. I wasn't feeling like they're going to qualify for Grands, but this performance was a great sign. We've got the next Divisional Cup qualifiers starting tomorrow. Let's see if they can make it. In 16th, we had Hicks and Kiro. Now, this isn't actually a bad placement. The reason why I'm including it is because they have now split. Hicks is going to be playing with Murstache. Now, this is a very interesting duo. Hicks is someone who, as I mentioned earlier, is a good leader, a great Polish player, someone who was left in quite an unfortunate situation following the move from trios to duos. He was the spare man in that team. He wasn't able to find a teammate. He's been bouncing between so many different people lately. Is he going to settle on Murstache? That waits to be seen. Murstache is someone who hasn't really been grinding the game lately. His performances haven't been that good. His Div Cup placements have been middling. He only qualified for 1 last season with Queasy, and they managed 37th in that, so it just hasn't been there lately. With FNCS coming around, we may be seeing him lock in. This is an interesting duo. It's a good dynamic. Murstache is probably someone that will work well under an IGL. He can just be allowed to frag, allowed to play freely. Let's see how they get on. In 19th, we had Focus and Thomas HD. These guys were actually my pick to win. I felt like they've been looking good lately. They seem to have kicked on from a great season 1, and the zones did not go their way. Listen, they are a team that have been known to complain about zones in the past, but this time I think we can understand where they're coming from, because over at Riptides, they weren't getting any of those zones. It just wasn't their day, and sometimes you just can't play from that kind of situation. In 21st though, we had Swizzy and Pixie, and this is a team that probably should have done better. We had them come out and tweet that mid-map isn't as good as everyone thinks. They don't seem too happy with the POI. They had it uncon in 5 out of the 6 games. They were surprise contested in game 1 by Power and Jax, but Swizzy and Pixie did win that spawn fight. Honestly, a team of that quality on paper with an uncon POI in the mid-map would have expected a little bit more. In 27th, we had Sanguild and Fridoxy, and this is of course the big spawn fight over at Squibbly Shores against iDrop and Marius. We all know that Fridoxy is the king of spawn fights in EU. Maybe a couple of people have forgotten that, but he proved that in style, winning 5-1, only dropping 1 game. Now, of course, he was getting cleaned up in a couple of those matches because teams were so aware of what was happening around them. He wasn't able to play out a lot of those games. He wasn't able to reap the rewards from winning the fights, but ultimately they looked solid. I do feel like Sangilde is a really nice option for Fridoxy. They have quite a fluid dynamic, which does work for the duo. Both players capable of leading, both players capable of fragging. Sangilde, obviously someone that did very well in duos with Marius, and we all know what Fridoxy can do too. Yes, it's been a bit of a slow time for him lately. He hasn't really been placing too well in the previous season, but I do believe that he will come back. I do believe that his quality will prevail. In 31st, we had a team that also struggled with the zones, and that was of course Mr. Savage and Velo. Now they were landing right over in the southeast of the map at that desert split, and well, from the zone map, you'll know that that was not optimal. Listen, these guys are doing great at the moment. They have a 100% record of qualifying for the Divisional Cup finals. They even qualified on NA Central too, more on that in a minute, so I don't want to be too critical of them. Yes, this isn't the Grands placement they would have hoped for, but things also didn't really play out in their favour. They're looking good. They've got a great dynamic. Savage is the leader. Velo is someone that can follow him. I've got bright hopes for this duo. Let's see how they get on in the next Divisional Cup. As per usual, let's take a look at my pre-tournament predictions and see how I got on. Now, for the first time in a long time, I didn't have the winner in my top 10. That was, of course, because Darm and Demus were triple contested at Tip Top Terrace over on the map. Even whilst contested, I wouldn't have put them in my top 10. That speaks volumes as to how impressive their performance was, how dominant they were off spawn, how great they were in the mid game. Really impressive stuff from them. I can't speak highly enough on their performance. I had Focus and Thomas to win. Of course, they underperformed. A lot of that was because of the zones. You can see a couple of my other picks didn't really come through. Shura and Repairs, 20th not being too bad, but not having the tournament I maybe would have expected. Shark and Teeny, of course, a bit of a caveat there. But listen, we go again next week. Over on NA Central, we saw Clicks and Higgs narrowly beat out Peterbot and Poyo to take their first Divisional Cup win of 2026. A really great tournament. Not the best for EU teams though. We had a lot of duos qualify. None of them were able to break into that top 20. I'll throw up a list on screen now. As you can see, Scroll and Zany were the highest placing one, only managing a 26th. It's great to have so much EU representation in the finals. Hopefully we can start breaking into those higher placements. I appreciate it's so difficult on high ping, but it would be awesome to see. I want to quickly talk about Thursday's Performance Evaluation Cup. We had Sky and Scroll win a game. Scroll hit a crazy 1v2 clutch to secure the Victory Royale. We then had King Cringe and Twy win game 2, and a lot of this was down to the fact that medkits are back in vending machines, and well, if you've watched King Cringe, you'll know that that benefits him a lot. Skyjump and Mumsy won game 3, and Focus and Thomas HD were able to close out game 4. And Thursday and Friday saw 2 days of the Piz Cup. This was a victory format, but we had Seti and Rax come out on top on day 1, which was Battle Royale, and then Cammy and Hari were the top team on day 2, which was Reload. Big credit to them. Subscribe to the channel to stay up to date with every single EU tournament. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.